Good morning, everybody. My name is Justin Cullen. I'm the Chief Digital and Data Officer of the Core Media Group, and obviously that explains my expertise. I'm going to talk you through some of the topics that we put down in the Outlook document and some observations, because it's interesting. With digital and online, it moves so quickly that even since the ink dried on the page, some of the stuff that I commented on has changed and developed. So I can provide you with some updates on that. For many, many years, those of you that know me would have saw me as that person, as in the crazy guy who arrived at the party in fancy dress and no one else was in fancy dress, because that's what digital was like many, many years ago. But really it's become so mainstream now, and I'm aware that as the presentations went on this morning, that there was a lot of conversation about what is digital and what is not digital, and what constitutes digital in the context of ad spend and how things are captured. It is difficult for us to kind of create that delineation because there's so much crossover now. And Eddie would have spoken about this earlier on, that online has become the largest medium in the market. Will become the largest medium in the market this year. And one of the things that we debate internally when we're doing the Outlook document is that how much more growth will happen in the marketplace. And if we look at more developed markets like the UK and the US, from my perspective, the growth is just going to continue to be there. I would hazard a guess that if we maintain the structure of classifying media spend in the same way we currently do, that digital will probably be about 50% in the next 5 years, because a huge proportion of broadcast income will be digital, a certain proportion of outdoor will be digital, and print obviously within the news media sector, and more recently in radio will be digital. But just as you aggregate it, it probably will get to 50% or more in the next couple of years. One of the really big things that we've been focusing on in the last couple of years is obviously data. And obviously there's an awful lot of talk about data, and an awful lot of talk about the term big data. We have a data scientist within the organisation, and he very firmly put me in this place after about a month of working here around what classifies as being big data. I can categorically say that none of us here in any of our companies in the room and Core Media will never actually work on a thing called big data, because it's classified in a mathematical way through petabytes, which are 100,000 gigabytes, and an average client of ours has 4 gigabytes of data in a year. And it's just interesting that when people talk about big data, the reality is we're just talking about data. We've all used data within our businesses forever. In fact, my first exposure to data was when I started in the industry, when Peter McPartlin asked me to phone the Met Office to do an analysis on 48 sheet illumination, and where I worked out. And since that day, I know that at the start of every day and the end of every day, 2 days is added in terms of daylight or taken away, depending what season you're in. And that was my first exposure with data, because data has always been around our business. The reality is what we have today is a new set of tools to utilize and process that data in a much more efficient way, in a much more aggregated way, so that it becomes really, really meaningful for business. And there's some businesses in this room that would have data, like Michael in AIB, you have data coming out your ears. But one of the challenges will be to aggregate it in a way that you can meaningfully use in your business, in a way that's digestible, that can actually create meaningful insight that will create business results. And that's a real challenge. Within our business over the last 2 or 3 years, we've been working with clients on data around things like attribution modelling, where we're starting to understand the relative participation that all the media make to driving a sale or to drive an engagement. Because obviously every media works together. No one media is the sole winner of a sale or the sole winner of a response. And to try and understand that interplay between all the media is a real challenge for our industry. But that's really where we're using data to try and get that insight through attribution modelling or econometric modelling. And there's a whole mathematics side to that. So as I said, we have a data scientist in our business. He has degrees in mathematics and computer science. He's very different to all of us. It's a very different type of culture. We are not mathematicians. If any of us were mathematicians, we would have gone into different career paths. So it needs to be embraced, and I'm sure some of you get exposed to some data people within your organisation. They're just quite different. They're wired differently. Their cognitive behaviour is very different, and we need to embrace that as creative people. But we need to ensure that data doesn't become an imposter within a creative process. It just remains an informer. Because there's some really interesting things. We're working on a project at the moment within the group, which is just at vision stage, where we're trying to get to a stage where we have live and predictive data. And imagine for a retailer, if you could try and pick up trends within food tastes and you could ensure that all consumers that go into a supermarket are able to get all the products they want. We've all walked into a supermarket and walked away not finding a product. But if avocados are trending this week, to feed that into the buyers to ensure there's enough stock next week to meet a demand that's caused through a spike that you pick up through social media, that's really, really powerful and could result in even 0.5% in sales in a supermarket group, has a massive impact. And it is, and I remember seeing a guy from AOL and he's talked about data, and he talked about, big data, small solutions. Because a lot of the time, data will not be a silver bullet for your business. It will not be something where you'll end up having a eureka moment where you thought everything you've been doing up to now is wrong because the data just told you and now you need to do everything right. It's actually small things, it's nuance, it's turning the dial. One of the trends this year that we saw within the business, and it speaks to the data agenda, is obviously the emergence of online ad spend. I think that's been a major frustration for a lot of media owners because there's no context against all of the other ad spend that's tracked. It's been a challenge for our clients because they don't understand what their competitors are doing and how it profiles. So a really, really positive step in the industry. But the one challenge in that is that, unfortunately for now, it only covers a very small portion of what spend is actually happening. The reason for that is that none of the search money is counted within that media spend, and search accounts for about 55% of all digital ads, online ad spend. It doesn't cover classifieds. Classifieds accounts for about 18%, and it only covers about half of the display spend. So I suppose that just comes with a caution. So if you're using digital ad spend or online ad spend data, please make sure that you're consuming it in the right way. It needs to be grossed up. It is very much just an indicator. It is not as robust a sample as it could be. Now we're working, as our other agencies and media owners, we're working with the relative people across IAPI and Nielsen to see if we can make that more robust. But the reported figures within that structure only account for 1/5 of the spend that actually happens. One really interesting area, and it would have been touched on, I'm sure, by Nick and other speakers in relation to how VOD is becoming really, really big within the business. And one of the interesting things that I want to get out as a message within the VOD arena is that what's small is beautiful. And what I mean by that is that our experience up to now about VOD and how our clients and how brands use VOD is they see it primarily as an extension of television and of a television set. It's not a television set. This little screen is not a television set. Everyone knows how we all use it. We use it in bite size. It's micro-consumed. It's not consumed in the same way TV is. And one thing that we are seeing from data that we are collecting from all of our VOD spend is that shorter lengths are really, really critical to creating the requisite response that you need. So one thing that we are circulating within our business and to our clients is this 20-10 rule. And that is 20 on a PC, 20 seconds on a PC, 10 seconds on a mobile, maximum length that your message should be. And it's interesting, in a recent session with a very large brand, we laid this out. They asked us to give them a challenge, something they should take on within the digital arena. And we said that we challenge you to make a brand ad in 8 seconds. And that is a really, really difficult thing to do. But that's what's required if you want to get into the hearts and minds of those consumers who are bite-sized consuming media on a regular basis. And you'll find then that you'll have anthemic broadcast commercials on TV or within cinema, but that needs to cascade down, and not as a cut down, because a cut down won't cut it. The social media sector is going through continual change. I mean, all of us who have been exposed to social media since it started off have seen massive change, and that continues to happen. There would have been a sense maybe about 2 years ago that the social media sector was settling down, that Facebook was the daddy, that Twitter was the up-and-coming child. Yet then, since then, a whole plethora of other social channels have come up. You take a social channel like Snapchat, that after an investment yesterday by Alibaba has now been valued at 15 billion. It has probably 300,000 users in the Irish market, maybe even more. There's no official data, unfortunately. But we see the way our consumers are using it, and the way consumers engage with brands on channels like Snapchat is really, really interesting. One of the big developments within the social media space over the last 2 years has been something we were quite concerned about 4 or 5 years ago, which is that Facebook opened up basically a free-to-air or free-to-market channel for brands to embrace and build audiences and use and get reach in a free way, and then they would shut it down. So once they have you almost like a drug. You're addicted to it. You continually work and engage with your 50,000 or 100,000 Facebook advocates. You get massive reach from all your posts. But over the last 18 months, Facebook have changed their algorithms to reduce the amount of organic reach. And why are they doing that? They're doing that so that brands will spend more money on advertising. And that is an absolute fact. It's not a conspiracy theory on our behalf. We've analysed all of the data. We've said it to Facebook themselves. They've shuffled in their seats a little bit, and that's as much as you'll get out of an American technology company for truth. But it is the reality. So what it means that we need to look beyond the massive channels of Facebook to engage with consumers. We need to look at how all of the channels work together, and we're seeing that certain channels emerge for certain things. So for example, Pinterest is an online scrapbook, and if you work within a brand set where visual stimulation is an important part of laying down the credentials or the proposition, or then Pinterest is the right channel for you, and maybe not Facebook. If you want to get immediacy of reach, maybe Twitter is the jump off point for people. Now, interestingly, on the opposite side of the Facebook reducing its organic reach, is that what Facebook is doing right now in terms of their video offering is they're challenging YouTube. So we are now, when we're trying to circulate video online or create virality or reach around video, what we're finding is that Facebook will build bigger numbers faster than YouTube does now, because what's happening, it's in your stream. They all go through your streams, they play automatically. With YouTube, you must go and retrieve it. So it's a much more natural play of video. So we're just seeing, the point being here, I suppose, is that the sands continuously change. And that will continuously change for the next 5 or 10 years. There's no reason for it not to change. And we still see, obviously, the bulk of activity happening in the large companies like Facebook and Twitter, but the other companies are really starting to steal a march on some of their audiences. One big issue within the digital industry of late, and we put it into the document, if you look at any blogs or any forums online, is the issue of ad viewability. And there's a number of questions being asked by various different stakeholders within the industry around whether online ads are actually seen. Are they seen by bots? And there's bot traffic in the marketplace where malware gets into a server and it literally downloads pages in the background, and it counts as each page is downloaded. The impression is counted. So in our reporting structures, that counted as a view, but obviously it wasn't viewed as a person. We did an analysis in this market, and our estimation is that really malware probably only affects between 1 and 3% of PCs in the Irish market. So it's not a major issue in terms of viewability. The larger issue in viewability is just how publishers structure their pages to ensure that consumers are seeing the ads. So we've done a number of analyses ourselves. Over the last 5 months, we've analysed about 300 campaigns using one of DoubleClick's Active View tool. And we're seeing trends emerge in terms of ad viewability and in terms of setting benchmarks. But we're probably, and the market is, and I say this at a global level, the global market is probably a year away from actually having robust benchmarks in this area. And one of the challenges is that the technology hasn't caught up with the consumer behaviour and the activity that's deployed. So our estimation is that today ad viewability tools only cover about 30% of the inventory. It doesn't cover mobile, it doesn't cover VOD, it only covers standard display. So really it's a very challenging area to even debate on, because if somebody says my ad view, only half my ads are seen, well, it's only half of 30, so it's only, and then we don't know what's happening the rest. Now that might create suspicion, but the reality is these challenges also exist in other mediums. And I suppose just because in digital it can be measured, it is measured to the nth degree. So what we're doing is we're working with all the publishers that we engage with as partners, and over the last 2 weeks we met with about 20 of them, and to encourage them to really look at this very hard and to try and improve their scores. But everyone's using a different tool, so there's no one standard, and every tool has a different methodology. They're all algorithms, it's all mathematics again, so it's difficult for people like me to understand it sometimes. But it's very, very early days in this space. But for us and for our clients, we're reassuring them that we're working on that agenda. So we set down benchmarks with all of our partners now, and we try and move towards higher benchmarks in the future. And they can be very simple things. where a publisher last week said to us that they realised that their ad viewability was being affected in terms of how the ads actually physically loaded, which is just a technological delivery process. They changed that, they made it more efficient, and their scores went up. So it really is for the industry to work on to solve. Another publisher said to us that they did some split testing. They used the same web page, they used 3 different pieces of software to monitor the same web page, and they got 3 completely different results. So it's not that I am distrustful of the information, but it's so early. It very much reminds me of ad serving technology 10, 15 years ago, when we were buying ads on sites and getting ad serving reports back, and they were just gobbledygook, and they were nonsense, and the variances were up to 70, 80%. Over the last decade, what we've done is we've built much more robust structures, and now the variances and the acceptable variance in the industry around ad serving is 10%. And I'd love ad viewability to get to that stage. I think the industry, and again, it's globally, it's not just an Irish issue. I was over in the States last October, and this is a big issue over there. But they have the same technology platforms, they have the same publishing platforms. So I'd say it'll be the end of this year before we get to robust benchmarks in this space. And there's a lot of work being done in that area. So we're working with the IAB, and we're discussing with all of our publishers. Another big trend that we're seeing, and this really has been stimulated by digital, but is completely not exclusive to digital, which is that there's a real blur between creativity and media. Digital has really brought it to the fore, but it does mean that the decoupling of media agencies and creative agencies in the 90s really may not be fit for purpose now. If you think about some of the stuff that Craig spoke about in terms of the inventiveness within the print sector and it coming from us as a media group, we see within digital that we're building creative platforms now as opposed to media executions. So work that we did last year, for example, for Toyota with Stephen Cluxon and Johnny Sexton and Katie Taylor and Paul O'Connell, those things are created within our business as well as placed afterwards. And that blur is going to continue over the coming years. What that means structurally for the industry, it's very difficult to predict, because it's very difficult structurally for agencies to recouple. But what will probably happen is it'll happen organically. What we've chosen to do within our business and within Radical initially is to bring in creative resource. So we have a creative director within that business now for the last 6-7 months, and that's making a difference. It'll be a slow burn over the next few years, but the reality is that it really does need to be addressed, and I'm sure clients see that all the time, where there is a real blurring of the lines. And it won't be without pain. There will be a lot of pain as this comes up. We end up in an awful lot of areas where there's grey conversations going on. If you take an area like social media, for example, within the agency sector, the agency world, whom should be responsible for social media? Creative agency, media agency, PR agency, activation agency. It's all of the above, and we're trying to work out those structures effectively with our clients, and I'm sure the clients are trying to work out how to have the right partners on board. So it's going to be quite an interesting transition within the marketing communications business over the next few years, and obviously that will have big implications on media owners as well. My last area to discuss is mobile, and really is one thing is, what is mobile? Because mobile isn't just this thing here. Mobile is actually becoming so many different things. If we look at all of the recent trend in wearable technologies, if we look at the emergence of the Internet of Things, we've seen some very exciting things out in our clients. Samsung, they have this future room where they have connected washing machines and connected cookers. And some people say, Jesus, that's crazy stuff. But the reality is that you can see how some of that connectivity can improve people's lives. If you look at something like Nest, where you can climate control your home, you can see that there is a benefit there to consumers' lives. And some of this stuff in its early stages can seem a little bit crazy. Some of it won't gain traction, some of it will fall by the wayside. But the reality is what it's feeding into is this sense of mobility around communications and devices that just moves digital and the internet beyond what we're all used to as the internet, which is these things. This is the fastest declining device in the internet, the desktop computer. So our frame of reference in terms of using this as our frame of reference for decision making around digital strategies, around activations, is just completely wrong. The strategy has to be around mobility and how things connect. And the reality is that mobile is just everything anywhere. everything everywhere rather. There's a reason why there's a mobile network in the UK called EE. And just that connectiveness is really, really interesting, and how brands engage with consumers through that is a big challenge, and there's no right answers around it, but it very much is something that's new because it links all the media together. Mobile technology, not mobile telephony technology, but just mobile technology in terms of wearables. And things like the Apple Watch is something to be curious about, because the real game changer, the Apple Watch, really is payments, because effectively it just means you pay, and that has a huge effect on how consumers engage with companies and brands and how they conduct commerce. And overall, in terms of digital's come such a long, long way, and now it's impacting on all of our businesses. For many years, there's a number of people in this room that didn't have to think about digital. Now we have to think about digital. We have to think about the challenges it raises for us. It will continue to challenge industries. There will continue to be disruption. But my big thing around it is that you just jump in, you just get your feet wet. It's the only way to learn about it. There's very, very, very few people who actually know what's going to happen in digital in the future. I don't. I have an opinion on many things, but it really is something that's going to continue to change, and those sands will shift. So maintain a constant curiosity around it is what I would advocate. And really that means that the journey just continues, because it has a long way to go, and it's by no means settled as a market, and it'll continue to change all of our businesses and all of the focuses that we have. Thank you.